Retailers can purchase from our brands directly, or through our marketplace or by contacting a sales rep. And once that sale's made, we pick, pack, ship the products on a 2-day turnaround time to retailers across the state. So we really try to provide this, like 2-day shipping, Amazon Prime type of experience for the cannabis industry. So that way stores don't have to store products for too long. Oftentimes they have small back rooms anyways. They can get fresher product because products are moving faster. They sell through the product.
This is The Dime. Dive into the cannabis and hemp industry through trends, insights, predictions, and tangents.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of The Dime. I'm Brian Fields, and with me, as always, is Kellen Finney. And this week, we've got a very special guest, Vince Ning, CEO and founder of Nabis. Vince, thanks for taking the time. How you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me, Brian. It's been doing well. I can't complain.
Kellen, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Looking forward to talking to Vince and enjoying another West Coast conversation. For our listeners, is that where you're located, Vince? Out on the West Coast?
Yeah, I'm calling in from San Francisco today.
Yeah.
What about you guys?
I'm in New York.
Okay.
I think we're going to get into it today, but I think that Nabis has some aspirations for the East Coast as well. It's going to take us a little while to kind of get us up to speed, but we can kind of dive into that. So Vince, for our listeners, can you give us a little background about you and how you got in the cannabis space?
Yeah. My background professionally comes from tech. And so that's where, I was trained in college, studied computer science, economics, stats, pretty quantitatively driven. And same with my co-founder, actually. And so, when we first moved out to the West Coast, it was actually to join tech companies. And so from there, we started out in corporate, working Microsoft, Facebook, just big tech, run of the mill. And then from there, started doing startups, enterprise software as a service companies. I sold my last company to Amazon. From there, wanted to work on something that was a bit more interesting than just software. Cannabis was just coming out of the fold in terms of recreational legalization in 2017 or 2018 was when first legal sales happened. So I was looking into the space, had a friend who had a cannabis brand, and I was just picking his brain one day. And I just wanted to meet more and more people in the industry because it was so fascinating to see, such a huge industry transition from the illicit market to the legal market. And, of course, both my co-founder and I are, we smoke weed and we were actually best friends growing up. So knowing him from high school, we would bond over, just smoking weed. And so it was a kind of a fun passion project of ours to just do some exploratory market research into this new industry that just made a ton of sense. And we wanted to just apply our tech skill set to the industry to see how we can help grow it. Just knowing how much the market was going to grow, how many operators there were going to be. We just felt there was going to be a lot of complexity and a lot of mess. And so what we wanted to do was get right in the middle of it into the distribution side of the sector and try to streamline as much as possible. And so from that one friend who became our first customer as a brand, through just word of mouth referrals, we just grew now to servicing over 150 exclusive brands on our platform. And we list them all on our B2B marketplace for retailers to be able to buy products from vendors and suppliers that we work with. And so some of our largest, more notable brands include Raw Garden, Ember Valley, Plus, Ganja Gold, Bloom. And one of the main values that we like to drive into the market is, of course, while we like to have the big, well-known brands on our platform, we also really like to help the small operators as well. So, major difference that you see in our business versus in another traditional distributors business is we serve 5 times more brands than any other distribution platform, and so it really we have a strong motivation to helping out a lot of the smaller operators out there to help them be able to launch and scale and sustain as well.
I'm fascinated by you and your co-founder's background, especially with the big tech, right, in Silicon Valley. When you're working for those big firms, you're pushing innovation. And now in the cannabis industry, you're kind of chopping down the trees and really starting the path forward. So any hesitation to kind of go from, let's say, big Silicon Valley tech to the cannabis industry?
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, it was a lot of just, I felt like because cannabis, in the back of everyone's mind, it just felt unsafe and insecure. That was definitely my initial, personal reservation coming into the space. But, when I that's why I kind of started with just like a friend of mine who was in the space, since we had trust, and he introduced me to more people, and I trusted his introductions. And so, a lot of our business today, as an infrastructure as a service business, is built on that customer trust. That lifeblood is really what gives people more confidence to refer more customers to us. And that's what makes this wheel spin. And apart from that, we honestly thought it was a really cool space. People in the industry were really genuine and real and authentic. The problems were very tangible. Coming from tech, you're always staring at a screen. I can't say I don't always stare at a screen today, but when you're delivering products, like I started doing the deliveries myself for the better part of the first year of operations. You get to touch and feel, what your service is doing in the industry, and how it's actually helping move products from point A to point B safely and securely, handling cash collections and processing that. It's a real business, and sometimes I feel like software lives in the virtual realm, and it's hard to touch and feel it. So that was something that was really fascinating to us, just coming from tech.
Yeah, that's super cool. I want to get into some of the nuances associated with taking the concept from inception, right, to actually like a fully functional platform. So in other startup kind of software-based industries, there's not a ton of regulations, right? So how did you guys kind of tackle all of the regulations and compliance and all of that associated with cannabis while designing the software platform to fit into that very complex environment, if you will?
Yeah, it's almost the opposite, right? Like now tech is moving towards this whole Web3 trend where everything's centralized and there's no rules. And cannabis is the most regulated. I mean, I think fundamentally we came into the space, and we honestly, there were people who said they were experts, were not experts because the regs had just come out, and so everyone was on the same playing field. And we actually just had to read the regulations ourselves to interpret it. There was no court precedents or legal precedents or any rulings on how various phrases in the regulations were interpreted. And so we just kind of had to go with our gut feeling, understand that there were obviously risks, and just be okay with it. A lot of the mentality back then, I think, was just, we were small time. No one's ever going to really, turn the rock and try to gut us out of the industry because it's not worth anyone's time. But then as we got larger and larger, we obviously had to get some lawyers involved and get a couple of additional opinions before we made decisions. I mean, I think though, when we still a lot of regulations and interpretations are, and I guess the decisions you make against those are judgment calls. And so when it comes down to it, for us, like we really just think about our main stakeholders. It's like, what do our customers want? What makes sense from a business standpoint? And then how does it affect, our team? How does it affect our shareholders, our own profitability? And then we just make a sound decision based on those main things. But it really comes down to, what the customer wants, just because I think that's sort of like our golden compass in terms of how we prioritize decisions.
It's very smart. So let's stay in like the early days. Take us through like what the business plan looked like, and then pitching those initial customers to kind of get them on board with the service, and then kind of the iterations and the scaling process, because the complexity of what you're doing is really challenging. And I think some people don't understand how many variables are being kind of handled at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, the first customers, it again comes back to just what the customer needs. And back then we didn't have our, B2B marketplace. We didn't build like a Nabis capital solution. We didn't build analytics tools. We just built a website to help people enter orders in that we would deliver and fulfill on, and we would collect payments for. And that's what people needed. Like they didn't need some fancy software to tell them like, oh, these like cool analytics. They didn't need AI. They just needed some way to deliver their products from point A to point B compliantly and get paid. And so, we came in as those trustworthy guys who, would do all of that and not steal from them, and deliver just a good quality of service for fulfilling their products. And that was the initial pitch. We would do the deliveries ourselves just to give that sort of high touch experience and build a relationship directly with, the execs at these companies. And through that, it's just one brand at a time. We just sort of pieced this whole thing together. And, we were learning from them just as much as they were using our service. And that's, whenever we ran into snags, we would just, build features to cover all the, sort of edge cases that came along in logistics. And over time, as these businesses and small upstarts on the brand side or on the retail side started scaling, they started telling us, oh, we need, financial solutions. We need analytics tools because my team's getting too large. I don't know what's going on in my business anymore. And they just needed more tools that help them at scale. And so that's how we started to build out and flesh out the rest of our platform. And that's what currently exists today. And, it makes sense when you look at other industries. I would say the business that we have today is similar to the fulfillment by Amazon business. And that exists in a very mature market in CPG. And, as the cannabis industry evolves into a more mature market, that's the solution that will likely apply here as well. So, I think we're moving in the right direction in terms of, how we've built that platform and how we started out piecemealing it together.
Yeah, I think it's so smart that you use customer feedback in order to build those additional features and tools because, let the customer tell you what they need and then build it around and support them because you're right. The more you support your customer, the more they're going to come back and rely on you and the more you're an integral part of the value chain. So let's talk about some of those tools. There's got to be some really incredible data insights you got on those tools. So what data insights can you share and what insights should operators be thinking more about?
Yeah, I think especially in this day and age, I would say cash flow is everything. I think people have, more or less figured out and people are really smart about how they build their products, what categories they want to invest in. I think right now on the product trend side of things, people generally are on the same page that, infused pre-rolls are really popular. I think beverages are on the rise, but, obviously there's still infrastructural challenges. And so there's general trends that people are aware about. And, I think our data definitely suggests that as well. But, I think the main thing that people really need to pay attention to right now is just getting paid on time, because ultimately that's the lifeblood of their business and ours too, for that matter. And so, a lot of the tools that we're building, that we've built recently and in the near future are targeted towards understanding creditworthiness of who the suppliers are selling to on the retail side so that they can make the best call in terms of, how much to sell to that store or what terms to give to them, and whether or not to use Nabis capital to help, provide liquidity for them, for their business. And, I think a lot of that falls within the backdrop of, the capital market environment, really shutting off. Public markets are down, not even just within cannabis, but just in the broader economy. Tech stocks are down 30 to 50%. And it's really, it's a bloodbath out there. And it's hurting private markets too. So with a dearth of capital coming into this space, businesses just really need to survive on their own. And so, for us, we're a platform. So we don't own our brands, any brands. We don't take equity stakes in brands. So, it is also our job beyond just fulfilling and the analytics and all that sort of stuff. Our job is also to help keep our customers alive too, because, we're nothing without, the operators on both sides of our marketplace. And so I think that's the current trend in terms of our feature development, as well as, what we'd like to share in terms of, how we'd like to shape the market and their decision-making when they make sales from an analytics perspective.
I want to stay on the capital service offering that you guys has put together. What was the biggest challenge putting that whole kind of department together in your guys' organization? Because it's not easy raising capital for any startup, let alone in cannabis, especially with all the risks associated with now you're pretending to be a bank, kind of almost in that same gray area marketplace. What were the conversations with some of the backers and kind of the entities providing that capital for liquidity in the marketplace? What were those conversations like?
Yeah, I think for creditors for that business, I think everyone saw the opportunity because of the fact that banks can't actually touch the space in broader perspective. And so as a result, our business, because we do the fulfillment, because we do the payment collections on behalf of all of our vendors and suppliers, we had sort of this like sort of arbitrage, or rather like we had unique insights into how creditworthy a retailer was. And it was very constant feedback because of our day-to-day collections activities. Like we knew how timely this payment was going to come from this particular retailer versus the next. And so that was something that's where the data really helps in terms of our underwriting and our ability to minimize credit risk. And beyond that, I think in cannabis, people really just need cash, and they don't necessarily want to take out a huge loan against their business since many businesses aren't profitable. And so this was sort of a way. So we have basically a factoring business, and it's a way for brands to be able to really get liquidity on a more granular basis. And
would you call it micro, like almost like microfinance?
Yeah, in a way, it is very like each invoice averages about $3,000 to $4,000, and that's how small the little transactions are. But and then brands can use it on a case by case basis, so they don't necessarily have to encumber their entire balance sheet with a huge term loan and not be able to pay it back, and run the risk of losing ownership of their business. This is a way where they can also just use their existing fulfillment partner to also help with their financing too. So, becoming more of this all-in-one platform for them made it easier for them to just basically just work with one party to get all these things done. And launching the product was really just, we thought about a lot of different ways to do it, but we just thought having it be done in line with the order and collections lifecycle, like a unit level lifecycle, was just the best way, because ultimately, it just streamlines the payment side for us, rather than having to underwrite every single brand every single time. It was just, invoices were generated. This is cookie cutter. We could generalize it, and we found like a scalable, repeatable way to do it. So yeah, and we basically so some of our investors invested in other factoring businesses and put me in touch with them. I got on calls with them, just gleaned some advice that they had, and some of the initial infrastructural setup that was required, and basically just set the same thing up. And it took about a few months, and we launched in market with a couple customers. And before you knew it, when people sign up for distribution now, they immediately turn on this financing service, because at the end of the day, it costs them nothing to have it on. It's only if they decide to use it. So it's always an added benefit.
Are most of the customers on the retail side?
Currently not yet. I mean, each transaction, includes a brand and a retailer. Right now, we basically, we underwrite the retailer because they're the ones ultimately paying.
That's exactly it. Okay.
Yeah. But then the brands are the ones who pay the fee for the factory.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's like both sides are in it together.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because the brands are the one that's getting immediate liquidity on.
And the retailer's taking the risk, right? Because now they have to pay it back. So everyone's got skin in the game.
Yeah, exactly.
It's got to be such a challenging process, right? Can you lay out like a little more of a scenario for that for our listeners to try to understand like exactly how that works? Because I think it's such an integral part, especially given like the cash capacities in the space.
Yeah. So the sort of example would be brand A would sell, let's say $100,000 worth of products in an order to retailer A, and there, out comes like an invoice. And, that $100,000 invoice might be sold on, let's say, net 30 terms, which means the retailer has 30 days to pay it back. After they have the product, they get to sell through the product. They'll probably have the cash to pay it back. The brand, oftentimes these are very small businesses who, $100,000 might be all the money they have. And so they put it all in the inventory. They shipped it off. They don't have the money to go start producing their next batch of inventory. And so that's not a good way to build a brand. And so because ultimately what would happen is after the 30 days, perhaps the retailer's sold through, ideally it has sold through the product. That shelf space goes empty. But as a brand, you don't want gaps in product availability on the stores of shelves. And so, they want to be able to start producing their next batch of inventory before that product sells through. And so what they'll do is they can take that invoice. It's an asset. It's an account receivable. They can sell it to Nabis, and Nabis will underwrite and say, hey, okay, as long as this retailer we know will pay on time, we will basically buy this invoice and then basically pay the invoice in advance on behalf of the retailer first. But we would pay it out at a discount. That's where we make our money. So we pay it out 97 cents on the dollar the brand gets their 97 cents and they can start doing whatever they want with it, running their business, paying payroll, start producing their next batch of inventory. And we will wait the next 30 days to collect from the retailer. And then we'll make that spread, that difference between the 97 cents and the whole dollar on that invoice. And so that's, one life cycle of the transaction, but it helps provide a lot more like liquidity in the market, as well as improves sort of the life cycle of the sort of like velocity of inventory through the supply chain as well.
Such a critical piece of the puzzle. And I'm curious to know, obviously you can't share from a business perspective how much, like as a percentage wise of your business that's become, but I'd assume that's probably that's becoming bigger and bigger as we continue, because that has to be such a massive need on a day-to-day basis. Because obviously what we've seen in California is challenges across the board, and that just being one of them. So let's stay on California. Can you describe some of the challenges that California operators are facing?
Yeah, there's tons. And, we feel it. Our customers feel.
Have you heard? KushCon is headed to Tampa this August 6th and 7th. Network with more than 7,500 hemp and cannabis professionals, sample products on more than 300 brands, and take in over 70 educational sections. Working cannabis or hemp? KushCon Tampa is the only place you can meet directly with the nation's largest distributors and retailers. Get tickets and learn more at kush.com/KushCon. Plus, listeners of The Dime can save 50% on tickets with promo code podcast. Again, that's kush.com/KushCon. See you there.
I think the biggest challenge right now is just incredibly high taxes. And the problem is it's actually starting at the top of the supply chain with cultivators. So right now ever since the inception of the California market, the recreational market, there's been a cultivation tax and an excise tax. And cultivation taxes were charged based upon the weight of flower that was produced. But, after last year, there's been this overproduction, oversupply of flower that's coming into the market. So, the average price per pound has fallen significantly, but the weight is still the same, if not more. And so what ends up happening is the taxes don't fall in line with the average price per pound. And so because you're still paying the same taxes, but making less money, we've heard cultivators saying that they're paying up to about 40% of their revenue in cultivation tax alone, not to mention all the labor costs and, the actual cost to produce this product. So, the state, I get it, while they're trying to make their cut of revenue from taxes from operators, also can't, smother the economy and kill the goose that laid the egg, And so right now there's been a huge coalition and lobbying effort to actually get the cultivation tax removed and, make adjustments to the excise tax portion as well when products are sold at retail so that, operators don't get squeezed. And it's, I think in the near term, operators being squeezed is obviously a problem. In the long term, I think for the overall collective of the cannabis industry, the legal cannabis industry, what operators will have to do is just increase pricing to make their ends meet. And who ends up bearing the cost is actually the consumer. And so when the consumer goes and buys weed, they will choose to buy it from the illicit market because there's no taxes being applied to their end cost. And it's oftentimes, same quality product. And so at the end of the day, I think what the government can do in the long run is just lower some of their taxes, keep the business alive and grow, keep the supply chain alive and sustainable and growing, which will ultimately help combat the illicit market. I think that's the biggest challenge right now in the California market.
I agree. And I think another thing too, we've some of our partners and clients we talked to out in California, they were like, we're not even gonna harvest this year. I'm not even gonna cut my crop down because the moment they cut it down, then it goes into that metric system where now it's taxable, right? And they're like, I'm not gonna make any money if I cut it down. So they're just letting their plants die in the soil because they literally are gonna lose business if they harvest it, which is wild to me.
Yeah, it's so sad. And there's tons of patients out there that need this plant. And to let it just go to waste because of taxes, no government reform, it's silly. I think a lot of the problems like this didn't really flare up or till now because, there's obviously the market forces of oversupply of product, but The other is just there's a lack of funding coming into the space, as mentioned earlier, around public market valuations and investors being a little gun shy these days in terms of writing those big checks. And so those big checks were the ones that were sort of masking the problems before, because people were just running unprofitable businesses. But as long as they were getting money from investors, they could keep their business alive. But now that pool of money is siphoned off, you really just have to run a sustainable business. And they're seeing that this is just a major cause of heartburn for a lot of businesses.
Turns out it's really hard to run a profitable business when the government is just absolutely destroying you with their taxes.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. It's crazy. And over-regulation is just, it's not helping anyone.
No. And I wonder too, right? Like when you have those conversations with them and you tell them, right, if you continue to tax us at this level, we're just going to let our products die and you're going to kill the industry. There's got to be some thought in their mind where if we kill the industry, you're not going to get paid on those fronts. And then all that tax money goes away either way.
I mean, you see other companies decided to leave California because of the taxes, right?
Yeah.
Move to Texas or something like that, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. It's true. I mean, the cost of running a business in California is, probably one of the highest in any state in the U.S., just from a tax perspective, but also like labor costs, cost of supplies. It's
cost of living for your personnel too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Cost of living.
Probably best access to talent, though, unfortunately.
For sure. That's true. And great weather.
Right? The ocean too, right? There's got to be something good about California.
Yeah, that's what you're paying for.
Doesn't have snow. So slightly switching gears, how does the distribution work and what type of paperwork goes in on those distributions? Like, is there tons of paperwork for all the products? How does that work?
Yeah, there actually is. And it's actually like such a really annoyingly like a small but major but like really impactful problem. But for our fulfillment platform, what we do is we'll intake products from cultivators, manufacturers. It's always final packaged products. Most often it's cannabis, like vapes, flower, edibles, whatever. And then there's also like batteries and like ancillary products too, and merch. And so we will store and centralize all of that inventory in our warehouses across the state. We have over 71,000 square feet. We're actually launching a new 86,000 square foot facility. So we're going to be able to service about 30. Right now, we're about 14% of the California market that we serve. And we'll be able to serve about 30% with this new facility from a storage capacity perspective. But what that will be able to do is after we hold more and more inventory, all of those products are listed on our marketplace. Retailers can purchase from our brands directly or, through our marketplace or by contacting a sales rep. And once that sale is made, we pick, pack, ship the products on a 2-day turnaround time to retailers across the state. So we really try to provide this, like 2-day shipping, Amazon Prime type of experience for the cannabis industry. So that way stores don't have to store products for too long. Oftentimes they have small back rooms anyways. They can get fresher product because products are moving faster. And they sell through the product. They pay us. Brands can choose to factor it or not. And on a weekly or biweekly basis, we'll pay out the brand. And we'll manage all the taxes, the packaging compliance, all that sort of stuff goes through rigorous checks in our system to make sure that when products get released from the wholesale market into the retail market, there's utmost consumer safety and compliance with the regs, so that no one has any sort of legal issues with respect to their products that they produce. So that's like the unit level life cycle of an order and cash getting paid out. And we sort of came up with this model as a result of just we wanted to just build a lot of efficiencies and economies of scale. Prior to us existing, pretty much brands were just doing their own distribution, and so thinking about thousands of brands working with thousands of retailers, that sort of like N squared problem. If everyone delivered their own products, the number of deliveries that would occur in the state would be insane. And so we try to bundle up as many orders and brands as possible into a single order, so it saves everyone time. That's the fundamental value of our logistics business.
Yeah, California doesn't need any more traffic than it already has.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to mention that the small but annoying problem is the fact that the compliance paperwork, you need everything from a shipping manifest that's wet ink signed. And then you also need like the COAs, like the testing results oftentimes. And I would say those are probably the two main things, but those testing results are oftentimes dozens of pages. The manifest could be pretty long too. And our system integrates with Metric, which is the state's track and trace system. And so, we input all the order information to there before we make the transfer and the delivery. But the manifest has to be printed out and wet ink signed. And if the state ever audits you for those records, they actually have to scan it back in to send it to them. And so it's just, the amount of paperwork that gets printed, reprinted, signed and rescanned in is just hugely burdensome. I mean, I would say as a business, we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on just paper and printing alone. And so from an environmental perspective or just a cost perspective in general, it's that is something that I would love to change. I mean, there's larger problems than that right now, which is the sad part, but that's like an obvious low-hanging fruit, in my opinion, to just get to just be allowed to do electronic signatures and electronic paperwork for the compliance side of things.
Is Metric working on a software platform that should be able, I mean, a DocuSign, right? Like that's my mind.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, when UPS...
An iPad, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. Like when UPS comes to your door, deliver a product, you sign on their little pen with their little stylus and their little tablet. In cannabis, you can't do that because the regs say you have to print these things out and get a wet ink signed.
Are there any limits when you're picking up product from someone that like, is it total volume limit? Is it total number limits? What sort of constraints are there?
It's really just capacity in our vehicles. On the wholesale side, there's no limit to how much product you can have in your vehicle for a delivery. On the consumer delivery side, however, I believe it's right now maybe like $3,000 that you can have in your car at any given time before you have to go back to the facility to pick up more product. But yeah, for wholesaling, there's no limit on order sizes.
What happens if a police officer pulls over one of your wholesale vans? I mean, that's got to be just an all-day incident of the paperwork. So how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's happened in the past for us. And, the paperwork definitely helps. They generally just let us go. They see that we're professional. We have binders. We have like iPads. We have, everything in the car, GPS locator, security cameras. It's not really, it doesn't look like, some cartel driving around products at all. And the driver will call our dispatchers and our team back at the warehouses and, get further information and verification as needed. But generally, as long as we show our distribution license and we show the invoices and manifests are all in order, they usually just let us go.
Your drivers aren't just driving around with like a safe they don't have the code to, so they pull over and he's like, I can't open it.
Yeah, that is exactly how it is. Our vehicles have safes that are like bolted into the floor, and it's a drop-in only safe. So once it's in, it can't come back out until it gets back to our facility, and the only a couple key folks at the facility know codes to.
Oh wow, that's exactly how it is. Check it out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So even if people get robbed, drivers get robbed on the road, they actually can honestly say they cannot get into the safe. Yeah.
It's probably a very interesting interaction with the police officer. I can't get into it, and I'm just really sorry about that.
I don't know the code. They're like, I don't believe you.
Yeah.
What is the biggest challenge setting up your business that most wouldn't know?
I would say a big part of it is recruiting. Cannabis, while everyone sees it as a huge opportunity and a lot of people smoke weed, 2/3 of all Americans support cannabis. For them to kind of change gears on their career and work full time at a cannabis company, I think would still raise eyebrows for a lot of people. And this industry, amongst any new industry, any other new industry, needs that good talent coming from other industries who have experience in logistics, supply chain, in CPG, in product creation, branding. A lot of those people just won't join the cannabis industry because it's still federally illegal. And whether it's moral or not, or if it's just a legal thing, some people, America was built on the backs of immigrants as a melting pot here. And, immigrants are oftentimes afraid of, being a part of cannabis because it hampers their ability to get a green card. And so, there's things like that really restrain good talent from coming into the space. And we need always constantly, our job is, I've built companies before this is the first time I think I've done, well, not the first time, but I think I would say this is the company I've done the most, education about the product on, in terms of not just our services, but what we deliver. Just because I think it's important that people who work at Nabis and people who are thinking about even investing in the space understand that this is a product that's worth having around in society, and it's it was wrongly put in a box back in the 80s.
Amazon used their data insight trends to release products. Any future roadmap ideas of Nabis releasing consumer-facing products?
No, not really. It's always been a thought, and people always ask us about it. But one of the big reasons we've been able to scale our platform to the extent that we have today is because we're grounded in this agnosticism, where we have a balanced portfolio. We have competitive brands shipping on our platform, but we don't do the sales for them, so we're not picking sides. We don't have our own brands. We don't compete with it. We don't create conflicts of interest amongst the customers we fulfill for. So that's for some other distributors who might do that, they can pretty much just fill out a menu space of one brand in each category and at each price point, and then you're pretty much maxed out on your menu, and then you just have to basically keep pumping those same 20 brands. For us, we wanted to help out that longer tail of the market because we wanted to give everyone an equal opportunity to get to market. Because we also believe that given how early days it is in the industry and how much R&D still has yet to come for the cannabis plant, there's so many more products that can be created and commercialized that why limit the market now in terms of consumer choice? And so we want to continue to have this open platform for small business operators to try their hand, experiment with new products.
Building out the technology stack, what was one concept or fact that surprisingly was overwhelmingly harder than you initially thought?
I would say it's definitely the inventory management side, because it has to abide by compliance standards, and there's unique SKUs and batches, and there's COAs, and there's kind of different depending on the product category. You could have various different. To define one unit, it actually requires so much metadata to actually to describe. And so that part, I think we rebuilt our inventory management system 3 different times, just because the regs kept changing and we needed to add more and more fields into our database. But I think we're in a good place now with our location-based inventory system, and there's very little inventory fidelity issues today.
Since you've been in the cannabinoid industry, what has been the biggest misconception?
Biggest misconception, I would honestly say it's just how harmful the product is. It's I think so many people in other generations, even my parents, will still question whether this thing is legitimate or not, and whether it's harmful to your body. But studies have shown that it's just so much better than what people drink every day, eat every day, like alcohol. And so I think people just don't believe it still.
Before we do predictions, we ask all of our guests if you can sum up your experience in a main takeaway or lesson learned to pass on to the next generation, what would it be?
I would honestly say, despite what kind of business you're building, relationships are key. I think it's about getting out there, meeting people in the industry, hearing what they're about, how they view the industry and how they want to shape it. And that sort of informs you on how to grow and build your business too, to serve them as potential customers as well. So, and that's definitely always served me well, even as a tech guy who I guess for all intents and purposes likes to just build a website and hope the customers will come. I think it's important to actually learn from them in person. So and see what their goals are. So that's been invaluable as an entrepreneur, I think, to still continue to do even today.
That's well said. All right, prediction time. Vince, will the cannabis industry follow the same distribution model as the alcohol industry? And if so, when?
I think it'll be different, mainly because when the alcohol industry started, that was before the invention of this thing called the internet. And I think with modern tools and technologies, you can actually build a much more sophisticated and efficient supply chain, especially for distribution. And so while the regulations might shake out to be similar, I think there's ways in which those regulations can be adapted today that with people who are making those regs, they're thinking has the modern technology baked in mind. So I think it'll be a much more efficient and cost-effective supply chain, I think, than alcohol.
Kellen?
Oh, that's a good question. Part of me says it might not follow the alcohol industry's distribution standpoint based on what the United States Postal Service is like technically allowing, right? So like they're actively involved in like these hemp shows and stuff for shipping like hemp, right? And so they just say put a COA in it and you can ship your hemp. And so if the US Postal Service is allowing you to like ship your own hemp flower or cannabis flower with a COA in it, that's significantly different than the alcohol industry, right? Because if I go to the Postal Service with a bottle of liquor, they tell me to go kick rocks because it's illegal for me to send like a bottle of whiskey to my dad in a different state. Like completely illegal for me to do that on my own, right? So I think that it could potentially be handled significantly, or it will be handled differently. And I also think that goes with my prediction that Amazon will be involved in the industry as well. I think that because there's delivery services for like I can get cannabis delivered to my house, and that's not as robust in the alcohol space either.
Yeah.
All right, Brian, what do you think?
I mean, obviously Amazon's coming, right? Like they've made pretty aggressive waves, and from a logistics standpoint, they're as good as anyone. So I don't know. I think it all depends on what ends up happening, right? What's the easiest to regulate and what's the most profitable for the government and what's the least amount of effort in order to kind of get started. So it's really hard to even make those sort of assumptions on that. So I'll go ahead and say, I guess, yes, just to be different.
Be the other side.
Yeah. So Vince, for our listeners, they want to get in touch. They want to learn more about you and your company. Where can they find you?
Yeah, so go to nabis.com, nabis.com. You can find out all about our services, what we do, what we're all about there. And then if whether you're looking for a job or you're looking to use us as a platform, the other is we have an Instagram, Nabis_HQ, and you can see in real time what our team's up to all the time.
Cool. Yeah, we'll link those up in the show notes. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's been fun.
Tell me, boy, you make me so bored. You need to walk the other way. I tell you once more. Please get out of my way. I don't want you no more. We're done here, boy. I know you think you're so fine, but you can't see it. I've been wanting to unwind.
Hi, my name is Kira Reed, and I'd like to invite you to be inspired by the women who are leading in the cannabis industry. Each week, we will discuss empowerment, leadership, and what it means to be a woman in charge in marijuana, hemp, and CBD. As the founder of the Women Empowered in Cannabis community, I have had the great pleasure to get to know many brilliant and talented women who are CEOs, executives, politicians, advocates, and community leaders that are focused on creating a cannabis economy that is just, fair, and equal. We'll learn how these women make decisions, how they navigate a predominantly male industry, and what they're doing to level the playing field for women. I hope you'll join us.